welcome everyone to our Capco webinar today, which will be all about the path to democratizing innovation for our teams. My name is Annie Rowland. I'm a partner at Capco and I lead our consulting practice, and absolutely delighted to be hosting this particular webinar today. Capco, I think, as I'm sure most people know, is a management and technology consultancy where we focus specifically on financial services. We've about 32 offices now globally, 7,000 people globally as well, and with a real mix of what I describe as both kind of industry SMEs as well as capability teams across digital, consulting, data and technology. And I think if you've worked with us, hopefully it's fair to say that we're very passionate in particular about working on the whole change, transformation and innovation agenda. And that's what we drive more formally under the banner of Capco Optimize. And in line with our topic of discussion today, the projects we really actually love getting into are the ones around workforce transformation and really the design of the future workforce roles and the whole modern delivery kind of journey around that. It's that workforce and empowerment of the workforce angle that we're really going to be getting into today. And I think it's probably true to say that at one stage we've all been in that role or that job where we just wish we had the development skills or access to a tool that would allow us ourselves to be able to automate a process or kind of fix a piece of work that we're working on. And frankly, just not have to rely on development or that IT book of work to make the magic happen. So that's what our panel today is actually going to address. How do financial institutions and the areas they work in develop new no-code roles and start really to provide tools to our teams that allow them to improve their own jobs and their own processes? So on that note, I'm excited to introduce you to the panel that we have today. And hopefully they're going to reveal all their top tips and secrets around the whole low-code, no-code story and the citizen developer model. So to kick us off, I'm going to introduce the teams. We have Mary Martin Hynes. Now, Mary is the head of global initiatives for corporate bank at Deutsche Bank. So that means she's responsible for the whole operation strategy and the large scale change programs. Having seen Mary in action myself, I think it's fair to say she is definitely a very creative transformation leader who is really passionate about using change as an opportunity to develop her own teams around her. And Mary is spearheading the whole low-code, no-code program at Deutsche Bank within the corporate bank. My favorite personal thing about Mary is that she's based in Dublin, so obviously my own hometown. Next up then we have Julia Shreeve, who is an executive director at Capco based in London. Now Julia heads up our Capco Optimize campaign, which really means she's looking at business functions within financial services and helping them to become more efficient and improve their performance through process and digital innovation and really looking at the workforce transformation around that. Next on the agenda, we are very excited to have Christian Lewis. Christian is a client director of financial services at Unqork. And Unqork and Christian are really helping firms accelerate the whole digital transformation agenda with the power of no code. In his role, actually, interesting, before Unqork, Christian was a founding member of Marcus by Goldman Sachs and the chief of staff for the Marcus app and the product and design team around Marcus. So very excited to have Christian here today and getting all the low-code tips from Unqork. And then finally, I would like to welcome you to Len Langsdorf. Now, Len is responsible for our innovation at Capco practice in North America. An interesting fact is Len actually originally incubated the concept of citizen developer with Unqork over 3 years ago now. And to be honest, he's really been an advocate and a champion of the whole model with many more of our clients across financial services. So hopefully you'll agree, a really great panel. I will just say to you, whilst I do have my own kind of list of questions prepared and ready to go, there is a Q&A chat button within your screen there, and I'd be delighted to kind of take any questions or comments that you might have. I'll keep an eye on them as we're going through the webinar, and I'll make sure that we bring out as many questions as we can as we go through the next kind of 50 minutes or so. But I think on that note, we will jump straight into it, because we're going to really look at what does it actually mean when we're talking about democratizing innovation? What actually is the story of the citizen developer? And importantly, what no-code and low-code platforms are actually out there that we can have access to? And obviously with Unqork leading the way on that. So I am going, I think, to kick off with Len first, if Len, that's okay with you.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be really interesting for people if you could actually just simplify and explain, what do we mean by democratizing innovation? So what actually is the path to democratizing innovation?
Sure. Democratizing innovation, I mean, it really supercharges any business. It enables the business to solve their own problems, to not rely on external teams to fix, change, or innovate. It enables everyone to be a change agent at their company and provide new career paths and opportunities for all. This has had a transformational impact across the industry. I mean, this is what true innovation, this is what is true innovation. I mean, we can't talk about innovation without understanding why it's so important, which is why I advocate it so much. I mean, when it comes to innovation in the workplace, I mean, it's well-being, and well-being fosters creativity. Creativity enhances well-being. And when you have more well-being in your life, which I would appreciate, think of actually getting a good night's sleep, having energy, being positive, open, optimistic mindset. This is how I see innovation, which is why I love it. You have more resources to be creative. It makes your work more enjoyable. It removes the drudgery out of your everyday and lets you do more exciting and challenging work. Work where most times failure is an option, just not big. And business that innovate can scale up, add more employees, allows you to take on more customers, but it really provides a huge amount of opportunity for everybody working in that business. And the key really is these no-code, low-code platforms, and Christian's gonna walk through an amazing platform for us. But these no-code, low-code platforms, really, they make the transformation possible, right? The power of these platforms, as well as their ease of use, has made it the go-to for every organization in this digital age. And just think about this, in 2 years, this will be the majority of the development at most companies, right? So the low-code, no-code applications are significantly more powerful than they have in the past. So if I think about my journey with Unqork, in the beginning, it was good. At this point, it's great, and I'm looking forward to the future. But these will be the majority of development, and you, the business user, will be the developer.
Great, thank you, Len. And I suppose, actually, Len, before I move on, is there anything else that you just wanted to bring up? I just saw you kind of the slide there with some useful points on that.
Well, I think from a low-code application development, I mean, 65% of all application development activity in all organizations will be low-code, no-code, right? So you think about it today, right? So if you want to get something done, you have to go to technology. It takes a long time. We don't have that time anymore, right? So I have a technology background. I have done startups. I've done 7 startups. I do a lot of technology implementations for Capco. But if you need to solve your own problems, you're going to use a low-code, no-code platform. And as I said, more than 65% of application development will be that. So think about it, it's the majority. So why the need? Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. Business ops is more digital and requires flexibility to handle even more rapidly changing business landscape. I mean, if you can imagine the changes we have gone through, what we thought would be a couple of months has been the past 2 years of nonstop change between government regulations, different expectations from our customers. We're working a lot with, across many different parts of financial services. Customer expectations have significantly changed. Where it was okay to sort of update somebody's bank account overnight, there's an expectation of instantaneous, or get an answer instantaneously, or support them instantaneously, right? IT, business can't continue to survive if they are reliant on IT support, because they have to adhere to, and rightfully so, the timelines and process, which means they have difficulty rapidly responding to the business and their regulatory needs. And you're spending too much time on repetitive manual work, which leads to many errors. And then you have, which is also my problem, which is the IT departments, right? So from an IT or technology department, we don't have enough people. There's a massive skill shortage. The complexity of requirements that are coming out are amazing. And there's an endless product backlog. There's always a new change, something else that needs to go. So we need these no code, low code, so we can develop and allow everybody to eliminate these bottlenecks. And so we can focus on what's important, right? We really need the technology departments to focus on the hard problems, the big bets the business needs to grow and sort of expand their market share. And we need the business to be able to solve those issues that come up and prop up right away, almost immediately, without having to wait to get into a queue.
Mm.
And there's quite a few advantages too to this when you're using low code, no code. I mean, unified, a single tool. So you're not learning 5 or 6 tools if you don't want to. And I think we're going to go over this with Christian. Like a single tool that you can solve almost every single one of your problems, right? And depending on the tool set, some tool sets are great just for internal, but then there's other tools that you can actually deploy to your customer and solve those issues. I mean, as an example, in the US, we had mortgage forbearance. Using the Unqork platform, within a week, we had solutions for our customers. It was mind-blowing. That was in production in a week. I don't think we could do that with the technology and the rules and regulations. You need to have it visual, like drag and drop. You need to see what you're doing. You don't want to be typing code. The idea of these low code, no code platforms are, we don't want you to go learn Python, Java, and also most of these are, most programming languages, if not all, are in English. So this doesn't translate to other countries. It needs to be enterprise grade. We can't forget about security. We can't forget about scalability. We need it to be up and running at all times. It needs to be faster, right? Easier to use, allowing you to significantly speed up problem solving. Accessible. Everybody should be able to use it, right? So you should be able to take a week's worth of training, a week's worth of citizen development, training, which is important. We need you to know the software development lifecycle, and you should be up and running, and you should be able to produce. And having that single platform, it should be cheaper, right? It should be cost effective, doesn't require huge investments, tons and tons of machines to run.
Yeah, and I mean, Len, there's so much there that we could get into, and I am going to come back to you later on just about the practicalities of bringing this to life on an actual project with, as you've said, an SDLC framework, governance and controls around it. But actually, Christian, if it's okay with you from, I suppose, your perspective from, obviously, as we said, founder of Marcus and Goldman Sachs, and then obviously into Unqork, in reality, to what extent are you actually seeing financial institutions actually adopt low code, no code solutions? Or is it still a topic that's just kind of being talked about, but not really implemented yet in practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. So low code, no code tools, I feel like, are becoming a part of the tool belt at all financial services institutions at this point. Just a couple of years ago, if you went to go communicate with a new bank, they probably wouldn't even know the phrase low code, no code. Now I'm actually even having customers directly tell me, hey, I'm in the market for a low code, no code tool. And it's important to note that because it truly has shown that you can drive innovation by democratizing this type of development inside of their organizations. So I think innovation in particular is a core use case in this sense, because these platforms can help to support that entire ecosystem. In the Unqork perspective, everything from the process of ideating to prototyping to developing, in addition to creating the actual change, low code, no code tools are being used to manage that innovation in the overall programs at these firms. And beyond that, even to build the types of applications that you need in order to solve those business critical issues. And where we've seen that become particularly valuable is in 3 key ways. One, it's around accelerating that innovation prototyping. So if you think about it, these customers are rapidly developing prototypes that can then easily integrate into their ecosystems, which then proliferates the usage inside these banks. And because of this, it's critical because these businesses have the opportunity to succeed quickly, but also to fail fast as well, which saves time and money. And we've seen a lot of uptick in usage around those use cases. And then more broadly, to even just manage the innovation pipeline. Len was talking a little bit about that backlog of work and effort inside these companies. Businesses are asking, how do we actually solve some of those problems that are sitting on the backlog? These tools are the answer to that. And then the final piece to it really is about setting up these programs is also extremely manual and sometimes prohibitive. And these tools can actually help set up those frameworks to even manage that innovation. So across the board, folks are now recognizing the value that can be added. And because of those that kind of ability to go into that ecosystem, the platforms are now even extending to all of the parts of banks where they're able to develop applications for end users.
Okay, thanks, Christian. And I mean, there's a lot of, I think, really good and positive points around it. And to be fair, I am going to push a little bit later on, frankly, around it sounds great, but what are the challenges in reality? Because you have to think about controls. And we've got some good questions and comments coming in here from people saying, are we not just paying forward tech debt or building up technical debt? So we will come back to that to kind of look at some of the challenges. But I think some really good points. And I suppose, Mary, just building on from what Christian and Len have said, because you're actually sitting in the seat in Deutsche Bank, you know, yourself, your team, your management sponsors around all of this, and you're, I suppose, effectively really pioneering the whole space for low code, no code to drive innovation. So I think it would be really useful for everyone to hear, like, how has this gone? Like, what has been some of the successes and the benefits of kind of pioneering this way of working?
Absolutely, Annie. Yeah. And I think for us, you know, within DB, specifically in operations, which is the area that I support predominantly, you know, we really focused on targeting the right opportunities to empower the right community of people in order for them to develop the right solutions. And I think following that framework has worked really well for us because ultimately it's yielded sort of two core benefits into the organization. The first of which is the deliveries themselves in terms of being able to tackle a lot of these automation activities that quite frankly would have been put on the long list for strategic change book of work year after year after year and continually would fall below the line. And so things like the automation of our reg reporting as an example, or being able to address internal workflow issues where they're not necessarily sexy projects for, you know, technology or the business because they're not client facing and you don't generate money off the back of them, but ultimately generate and eat up a lot of employee effort. We've been able to tackle by using these low code, no code tools because it gives us the framework to be able to automate these items quite quickly, you know, with employees that have, you know, training and are skilled to be able to address those tools. And, you know, we'll talk through, I think, some examples more specifically a little bit later on in the panel. But the second area where I think this has really benefited us from an organizational perspective is really from a people empowerment perspective and a career development point of view. You know, being able to employ these tools has created new career paths for our operations staff that quite frankly didn't exist even a year ago. You know, and that's something that's quite exciting for a lot of our employees because particularly in operations, you know, the story over the last 15 years has been centered around offshoring, about redundancies, about making, you know, teams smaller and smaller and smaller. And so this has actually been an injection of excitement within our teams because it's something new, it's something different. It's a way for them to be able to leverage their process and product skills that they've honed over the last number of years and pivot to use them in a new and different way. And so it's created new career opportunities for folks that might have felt like they were in sort of dead end roles or maybe felt like they needed to pivot out of operations to be able to progress and advance their careers. And so, you know, this for us is very much part of our big future of ops workforce strategy that we're developing, you know, within Deutsche Bank. And it's one of those tenets that we're really seeing a lot of excitement and momentum behind from our staff as well.
And I think it's that last part that when we talk to our clients and the teams that people get really, really excited about. And it's building this new term as well of the era of the citizen developer. And we hear that kind of thrown out there quite a bit. But I suppose, Len, if you wouldn't mind if I went back to you for a second, and I'm not looking for the academic answer, but the real answer around what actually do we mean by the role of the citizen developer?
I think I want to make one quick comment, and you can go to the next slide. So really, if you think about it, a lot of banks have said, major global banks, there's not going to be bankers anymore. There's not going to be this concept. Everybody's going to have to be kind of a technologist, right? And so this is sort of, we're on this journey, the citizen developer. I mean, they've been around since the dawn of personal computers and business. I mean, the invention of spreadsheets is where they started. Because spreadsheets, I mean, come on, they significantly reduce the amount of time to make business decisions. Are they perfect? No, there's a lot of problems with them, which is why we don't use them for regular production and other issues. But business or ops teams, need support from their IT department to fix these issues. I think, Mary said it best when she said, well, we get to work on those projects that don't make money. They may not make money, but they're critical to the business. But the IT departments can't prioritize them because, they may prioritize revenue and profit over just fixing this issue. So this is what enables, right? Because you're at the mercy of technology's timelines and process that are outside of your control. You end up spending too much time on repetitive manual work, which leads to errors, especially from a business standpoint. I mean, I've mentioned before, IT teams, there's a huge skill shortage right now. Try to go hire developers really quickly and you find out. I mean, we're lucky at Capco, we have some amazing ones, but it's difficult. And the citizen developer is letting everyone solve their own problems, removing that manual work and sort of tediousness of it every single day. And it's really the role of the future, right? I mean, so citizen developer is a business user with little coding experience, baseline technical skills, but a desire for change. They don't want to see things as they are. And I think with working with Mary, we see that with her team, there's a desire for change. We want to fix these problems. And then they get to leverage these no-code technologies combined with their sort of business process acumen to build these solutions within their operations area. So that's what a citizen developer is. But a citizen developer can't exist without the right structure. So there's lots of questions like, how do you implement this? How do you prevent, citizen developers from going rogue, creating shadow IT organizations, and creating a whole separate group? And that's where that sort of COE, citizen developer model, comes in, right? Where you establish a streamlined and compliant software development lifecycle for citizen developers. It's not the full citizen developer lifecycle. I'm not, checking into GitHub. This will be foreign to some people. Doing a pull request, doing all of this, but you have a process with these tools where you go through the stages of software development, but it's easy to do. It's not a burden for the citizen developer. So you have that structure in place. You have a COE, you have the prioritizations. So why is it the role of the future? I mean, think of, we're in the midst of dramatic change in business caused by the pandemic, making every business digital and technical, whether you want it to be or not. This means we must enable the business users, citizen developers, to create digital solutions quickly and adapt to the dynamic business environment. I mean, business users understand their business significantly better than anybody else. They live it day to day. They are the most equipped to solve the problem. The only thing that they were missing was the tool set to solve the problem. And this is where those low code, no code come in. And this is why citizen developers are enabled.
So Len, I think, we've really framed what we mean by citizen developer role. And actually, what I'd really like to get into now, and I'm looking at the chat channel here in the questions, and they are great questions because they're all about, sounds fantastic, how do you implement this? And Julia, if it's okay with you, I'd like to bring you in for this topic, because obviously in your role, your job effectively is to stand up and try and implement citizen developer programs. So from an honest perspective, like frankly, what are some of the challenges that you've seen or Capco have seen that you think is really worthwhile raising?
Great question, Annie. So I would say that the challenges that we've seen emerge from organizations looking to kick off the Citizen Developer Initiative break down into 3 categories, which at the highest level come down to people, process, and technology. So firstly, on the people side, and as Mary said, it's about investing in the right people. So looking at the citizen developers themselves, the role is a voluntary role, which requires dedicated time to perform these citizen developer-driven activities away from day-to-day responsibilities. Therefore, it's really important that citizen developers have support from their line managers and they're able to ring-fence part of their working week. Without this, there's a risk that activities end up being picked up outside of working hours, or they aren't progressed as quickly as expected. And really the key to avoiding this is identifying the right people for this role up front. So it's important that citizen developers are impacting their world, and it's those with a genuine interest and appetite to learn that are selected, and that from the very beginning, they become part of the process of selecting and framing possible innovation use cases. And then secondly, I would say it's about having the right processes and control in place. And there's a lot of questions about this on the chat. So it's imperative to have a formal governance framework in place for a citizen developer program. This establishes governance, adherence to organizational policies, defines roles and responsibilities, and provides guidelines under which all citizen developer activities should be performed. Having these standardized procedures also means that citizen developers follow structured methodologies for developing, testing, and deploying their solutions. And the most successful programs we've seen at Capco are those where there's a strong senior decision-making forum established up front as well to set the overall strategy, develop governance, and promote best practices. And then thirdly, on the point of technology, so being very mindful of Len said of not creating a shadow IT function. So business functions that we've seen successfully roll out a citizen developer program have done so hand in hand with technology from the outset. And they've also set up a citizen developer center of excellence or community of expertise, as Len mentioned. And this is to provide access to tooling, best practices, IT support, and also examples of other successful solutions that have been developed by the community. And then finally, I guess the final point is just from a technology perspective, then also understanding the tooling that is available to citizen developers is really key. So I guess one thing we have seen is that sometimes there are high licensing costs involved, and this can be a major challenge. And we've seen that the costs of development and actually the ongoing licensing costs for some low-code, no-code tooling can sometimes outweigh the potential benefits. So to combat this, I guess through our work in this space, we've learned that really establishing a central tooling repository is key. So helping citizen developers understand the right tool for the right use case, and that licensing costs and other costs are factored in up front. And where it makes sense, we're streamlining these through joining up with and sometimes merging with similar use cases that exist across other groups.
Okay, thanks, Julia. I know you've covered again many different angles that have actually touched on a lot of the questions and comments coming in, because there's been a lot of comments now around how do you deal with sensitive data in the platform and the kind of application security perspective. So I think on that topic, I do want to spend a bit more time a little bit later on to dig into that a little bit more. But the final thing you talked about was the tooling part and the central repository. And actually, I think that would be useful, Christian, if you wouldn't mind if I kind of brought you back in here, because we've talked about the citizen developer role, but we need to know what platforms are out there, because that's kind of half of the deal. And obviously Unqork are a big player in that. So it would be good to learn a bit more about what technology is actually available to the citizen developers, and like what functions are citizen developers actually using the most that you've seen so far?
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Unqork in this case. So Unqork is a SaaS-based solution, all accessed through the internet. And we deploy essentially single tenant cloud environments for our customers because we recognize that multi-tenancy is not an option when it comes to your data. And you need to control kind of the keys and the access to that information. Upon deployment of our platform, we have frameworks that can control access both on the developer side, but also to specific components on the front end for their experience through roles-based access controls. And I've really seen like several models where engineering is administering and managing the framework and controlling that full SDLC, building templates and best practices to jumpstart those citizen developers. But I've also seen central functions within operations teams and other groups to really develop COEs around those tools. And when we're talking specifically about Unqork, Unqork is the first truly no-code platform that focuses on enterprise-grade software development for regulated entities. We work with folks not just in the financial services space, but also in insurance, healthcare, and public sector. And the support and security around our platform proliferates across all those industries. So one of the three kind of key things to think about when you're thinking about Unqork, and Len touched on these a little bit, is one, that it's entirely unified. So everything from being able to generate your workflows to your analytics and creating dashboards, to setting up an integration with a third party or internal system, to even building out some of your front end experience for your customer, or even a headless application and backend service. That's all done within that unified web experience. The next piece is that it's entirely visual. For me personally, I am not a developer. I did not have a developer background. But when I joined Unqork, my first project was to build out the Paycheck Protection Loan Program application. And I did so in about 3 days using the tool. And the reason I was able to do it is because everything within Unqork is an entirely visual drag and drop experience. In addition to building out the logic that sits inside the platform, it's very reminiscent of Excel. So a lot of the different types of if, ands, and so on, I'm very comfortable with that because I came from a financial services background. And then finally, the point that's really important, especially for our tech risk teams and our compliance teams, is that we're enterprise grade. The fact that we are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, Privacy Shield compliant, all these things are just table stakes. Even for our financial services clients, you are also HIPAA compliant when you use our platform, just given the fact that you gain all of those certifications from across our different folks. And I think like moving forward, really the way to think about our platform is that it's providing a lot of key functional metrics and benefits to your business. One, because you're able to build quicker and provide access to those BAs and those citizen developers, they're able to actually reuse a lot of the configuration that has previously been developed. And with that, the integrations as well. That allows them to build these applications 3 times faster. Not only are they closer to the platform to do it, but they're also closer to the requirements. So they're able to help shape out what these applications look like in a much quicker pace. It's also more cost effective. As a fully managed solution, you're getting everything from the production support and oversight of that environment, in addition to the ability to create all this connectivity across all of your applications. And then finally, it's much more reliable because it is a cloud-based service. And finally, it's also got much fewer defects when you go to production. Everything within the platform has an entire SDLC toolkit that sits around it, in addition to automation testing, which you can check across every single application that is built before it goes to production. With those single tenant environments, you're provided 3 single tenant environments that allow you to promote between staging, UAT, and production so that you can do all of your appropriate testing and the right folks actually have access to that with that roles-based access controls. So you're probably wondering, how are people actually using this platform and what types of services are they building? And it spans across 4 very key buckets within the financial services industry. We see quite a bit of applications that are built around the entire client acquisition and servicing lifecycle. So imagine a mid-sized bank is a bit strapped on their engineering resources, and they're looking to build a new credit card onboarding experience for customers. And they're testing in the market to create that application. Not only can they build the form for the customer to apply and also get their credit score checked automatically through an Experian plugin that we have in our platform, they can also build the decisioning that sits on the back, as well as the agent user interface to help service that customer as questions pop up. And finally, lend them to a customer portal with all their information in one place. We've seen customers also really focus on the operational aspects. So think trade exception management at some of the larger banks. I personally also find end user computing tools to be a massive, massive, massive space for low code, no code tools. Having personally experienced them myself, it's a huge, huge benefit, and I wish I had it. The next two, marketplaces. So if you think of a lending tree or a Credit Karma, because of our integration and API framework, we've got customers who've actually built full-on marketplaces with third-party providers, actually allowing them to get offers from one single hub that is built on a low-code, no-code tool, all look and feel and style of that bank and customer. And then finally, risk and compliance. Everything around your RCSA processes to your incident management, to your L1, L2, L3 issues and incidents, you can actually create hubs and portals connected to third-party systems or even generate entirely new processes with workflows to the appropriate approvers and folks across your organization in a way that you would not be able to with your typical development, because those processes are always going to be iterative and always need to change. And as investment in that service may not be all consistently the same over time, with a low-code, no-code tool and empowering those citizen developers, you're actually gaining the access for ongoing maintenance and updates to these systems, which is one of the key kind of drivers to support the ecosystem.
Christian, I think, I mean, for me, hearing about the applicability of actual use cases it makes it so much more relevant. And I'll give you a heads up that I am going to come back to you in a few minutes, because I'm not a developer either, so it really kind of jumps out to me. I think, wow, there's so much that I could do with this. But I would really like to get your opinion and some of the other panel in a few moments around, what does technology think about this? You know, how do they feel that they're partnering in this? Do they feel it's a threat to what they do? How do we align, you know, with technology around this? So just something to kind of have a think about. But Mary, in the meantime, if it's okay, if I jump to you for a second, because we have been talking about use cases. And obviously you're actually a year down the line now from kind of deploying and setting this all up with Deutsche Bank. So what's the vibe around how it's landed with your teams, with kind of what technology think, and also any use cases that have been particularly impressive with the initiative that you've been driving?
Sure, Annie. Yeah. So, I mean, I think definitely, you know, the response has been largely positive. I think, you know, one of the key reasons that it has been positive is because we started the journey in partnership with technology, sort of working hand in hand to implement this solution. And I know that, you know, both Julia, you know, Christian and Len have also touched on this as well, the importance of this not just being sort of a business in a bubble activity, but that it's really looking across the stack and that you're engaging the right partners on the journey from the beginning. You know, obviously there are concerns around federated IT and ensuring that we're not creating sort of UDA 2.0 in terms of creating end user developed applications that just sit sort of in isolation around the periphery. But I think, you know, working through those challenges collectively ultimately has helped us to be able to implement a program that enabled us to start small, but take a very structured approach so that ultimately we can look to scale this in future as we continue to go down this path. And that for us is really critical. I think if I speak to some examples around maybe use cases, because I see that some of that's come up in the Q&A as well, and also just to give a feel for the types of opportunities that this has enabled us to tackle. You know, one prime example where we were able to implement this quite quickly off the blocks was in our Pakistan operations team, looking at a lot of the client reporting that we do in the security services space. And again, if going back to my earlier points around this type of work, you know, these would be activities where we would manually have operators that would be compiling these reports historically within a line operations team, very time consuming manual, pulling information from lots of different data sources in order to implement it. You know, again, very low on the pecking order in terms of prioritization if you're looking at sort of big strategic change the bank initiatives and implementations, because you're not, you know, earning revenue or creating greater profitability off the back of these processes. And so and then if you factor in also the geopolitical elements of Pakistan as well, where, you know, there's a lot of restrictions around data leaving the country and not being able to be processed outside of the country, we've always been quite limited looking at some of these opportunities. And what this citizen developer model and the introduction of low-code tooling has done for us is really enable us to be able to tackle a lot of these problem cases that would have sort of fallen between the cracks of our strategic CTB for all of those reasons that I just outlined. And so in implementing Alteryx in this instance, what we were able to do is essentially look at that suite of reporting that took, you know, several operators to be able to implement on a monthly basis, and essentially automate it using connectivity to different systems and different data sources automatically, and essentially have Alteryx do the lift of the report compilation and production. And in the end, that enabled us to be able to reduce headcount from the platform, but also enabled us to have our operations staff focus on tasks that are a lot more engaging and important from a day-to-day delivery perspective, and ultimately turn those efforts into facing and solving client problems or addressing other issues across the process stack. So, that's just one example of an area where we were able to use these tools to be able to address a very specific business problem that probably would still be sitting sort of working as part of a team manually somewhere in the stack without the introduction of this capability.
Okay, thanks, Mary. I mean, that's quite a lot of progress in the year, to be honest, since the initiative's been set up at Deutsche, and obviously a really great example there. If it's actually okay with everyone, I've just been keeping an eye on the chat channels, and there's so many great questions coming in. So I'm going to open it up completely to the panel, and actually I'm going to add in one final person to the group, and that is a managing principal at Capco called Aggleton. And we thought Laws would actually be a great person to bring into the panel because of what he's doing, particularly around setting up the control, the governance, when it comes to low code, no code initiatives, and actually probably perfect timing, because a lot of the questions, as I've said, have been around, it sounds great, but how does this work with governance or not, or controls around it? How do you deal with sensitive data? What do technology think about this, and how are they partnering in this? So Loz, if it's okay, I'm actually just going to put you on the spot straight away and just fire that question at you, because as I said, we've had a lot of comments come in around that topic.
Thanks very much, Annie. Yeah, so I'll start off on the governance point. I think when you first start out on the system developer journey and you inherit the governance that you've already got for your SDLCs, you might not realize the challenges that it's going to bring, because you're just learning. It doesn't matter too much if you take a little bit of time to get through your processes and promote to production. The challenges with governance and bad governance comes in as you get increased volume and increased frequency of applications, workflows, and opportunities. Because if you start getting to sort of 2, 4, 6 week sign-off processes for each of those, when it's only 2 a month, you can just about handle it. If you get to 20 a month or 40 a month or 80 a month, you start getting to a choking point where fundamentally, not only are you not able to promote into production because it's taking a lot of time of the system devs up, but it's taking a lot of time for anyone who's administering the governance as well. So the solution that we have to move forward on this is, one, we have to start with an automate first, as much as possible of any governance policy here. Has to be fully automated, has to use the same sort of workflows that we would expect to actually build in the applications we do as well. And two is you have to use governance by design. So a lot of these questions about data security, data loss prevention, data confidentiality, as well as the risk measures that different process flows might have, need to be baked in and inheritable from the platform through to each individual flow. I don't want a system developer have to understand how data loss prevention works or how access management works. I want them to be able to state, this is my confidentiality level of data. This is the number of people I want to allow access. We agree that these both are appropriate. Let the platform manage it for me. I think that's the sort of very quick answer on that. There's a lot more to it, but that's good.
Thanks, Loz. No, I think that's really useful. And I suppose connected to that, and I don't think we've fully addressed it yet, and I'm happy to open this to all the panel, is our partnership with technology. So there's a few different aspects to this. So I suppose, first of all, how do we afford paying forward technical debt as a result of opening up development unconstrained to the business? So that's come in explicitly as a question. And maybe we'll just address that question first. So I'm not sure who from the panel would maybe want to jump in, but how do we afford building up technical debt by just opening up development unconstrained to the business?
Well, technical debt is a result of developers who don't have enough time to actually go solve a problem. Right, so we're not using platforms. So all my technical debt, I think a lot of my technical debt in my 25 plus years still exists somewhere. right? I wasn't able to finish this particular feature. It's not exactly right, but that's because I was coding it, right? So it eliminates a lot of this technical debt. Technical debt doesn't technically exist anymore because it's a platform, right? So if Unqork or any other tools that you're using, as they go and fix the tool or they make changes to the tool, it fixes the technical debt. So you've shifted the technical debt responsibility for, certain bugs and everything else to the vendor, right? So make sure you choose a good vendor like we have. And then from there, you really shouldn't have to worry about it. Now, what it does allow you to do is the IT department now gets to go fix all their technical debt and maybe free up some of their time. Not that it's fun to fix it, but you eventually get to go back and you actually get to resolve the technical debt. You had to release it really fast. Remember, technical debt a lot of times is caused by the business needs this now. How do I fix it?
Yeah.
Right. So if you take that away from technology and say, well, the business can go fix it themselves, you get better code, you get better applications. And as Mary said, technology gets to work on those revenue generating, it makes money things.
Yeah. And I suppose, though, to build on that, though, how do we ensure that we have, the technology are still a partner at the table, right? And they are involved in the strategy, or are they involved in the strategy? Does it need to align to their strategy? I mean, Mary, maybe you have a view on this, having, as I said, gone through this already quite a bit in Deutsche. How has it worked with the kind of technology teams?
Yeah, and I would say 100% it has to align with the technology strategy of the enterprise or the firm that you're working within. So, as Christian put it very well, this is one of the tools in a tool belt. And I think the key thing from my perspective to for the audience to remember about these types of tools is that it's not about shoehorning all development into these low-code, no-code platforms. It's about identifying the right opportunities that can be addressed by these tools and ensuring then that people are empowered and able to deploy them and use them effectively to work alongside the other strategic applications that would exist already within the firm. And I'd be lying if I said that everything was smooth sailing from day one from a DB perspective as we tried to implement this and that we were all holding hands and singing Kumbaya. There was definitely some very difficult conversations that we had to have with, a number of partners in technology and other parts of the bank to really communicate and convey what it is that we were trying to do here and the importance of that. But I suppose the good news is that our CIO for the bank recognizes the importance of these tools and sees this as one of the future levers and has been very supportive in sort of pushing this agenda forward, in terms of really driving the setup of a bank-wide community of expertise within this space as well, that operations is obviously one group that's plugged into. So, I think this is very much a journey for companies, and it's something that people need to be prepared to kind of have conversations on, both positive and some challenging ones. But ultimately, I think if you can determine where the line falls between the opportunities that you can address using the low-code, no-code space versus the opportunities that fall within the traditional IT development space, you can really unlock a huge amount of opportunity to be able to blitz through these things a lot quicker than we've seen in the past.
And Mary, on that point, and it's just for clarity for people, is you've mentioned about picking the right opportunity, that can be either the strategic change or one that the citizen developers can do. So a question has come in, though, which is someone saying, well, the majority of our change requirements that they're looking at actually concern their existing applications. So does low code, no code allow these users to make changes to those applications too, or not?
So typically the user wouldn't be making changes to the strategic application, but what they may be able to do is take data using an API from that application and to be able to work with that data in a different way. And I think, a lot of the ways that we view sort of how technology runs and how these applications run, we need to turn on its head a little bit and think about a little bit differently. Traditionally, what we would have seen in the banking world in particular are these big box banking applications where you would have your, account ledger or DDA and all of your processing activity associated within that account in one place. The cloud model has completely turned that on its ear and moved us more towards an API-based model where you have microservices that are performing different functions of this. And as a result, speaking, I suppose, purely from an operations perspective, you know, what this enables us to do is actually use those microservices to pull the different data points that we need in order to be able to run our processes, and we can do that in a different way. So, you know, I think this is where the conversations with technology become really important, because you can understand what the strategic architecture is for the organization or for your particular area, and then really start to unpick, well, what are the specific things that I need to do in order to be able to do my job? And does that have to sit in the strategic app, or can that sit somewhere else? And that's really when you start to unlock the potential here and change the way of thinking in terms of how we view these systems.
Okay, thank you.
I think
sorry, Kristen, go ahead. Yeah.
One thing to kind of add to that, because everything Mary is saying is like exactly right. And I think the thing that makes it even more automated is that these tools also have central systems that actually let you monitor the work that's being done on the platforms, which is, if you're in a business function, typically in the past, and you were trying to create systems and macros and tools to automate your day-to-day, you're doing it in a vacuum, and it's a black box that is a regulatory concern. With tools like Unqork and low-code, no-code tools, especially those that are focused on enterprises, every single event is being stored and tracked, and you can actually audit that. And it's hugely important, because your technical teams now can get insight not only to the performance of these applications, but also to the data and information that's being stored, changed, and updated through it, while also putting it within a proper SDLC process for testing and releasing. So those types of toolkits were never accessible in a way that you could deploy platforms to your citizen developers, and now that's completely available, and it's consistently getting better as well.
And I think that's the main thing for people to hear, which is it can be deployed in a safe, controlled way that works in large financial institutions and can have a partnership with the technology team. So I think it's a great point, Christian. And I suppose on the point of tooling, and again, we've a lot of questions coming in around this, which is, I mean, what's your vision on the wider adoption of low-code, no-code platforms and tools that are out there? And I suppose obviously your Unqork, but a comparison even of the different type of tools that are out there and accessible to people today.
Yeah, I believe that low-code, no-code platforms are critical in supporting financial services firms and their overarching digitization journeys. And like, I think a lot back to one of my first roles, where I spent some time in a middle office function at a bank. And my first task was to work in a trade exception management process. And the process as it stood and as I inherited was download an Excel sheet from a system, run an Excel macro on it, manually read the outputs to my neighbor out loud so they can spot check what happened, and then manually input those numbers into the system and then have my manager approve. And as you can imagine, after doing that process a few times, I was begging my boss to get access to the source code. Me not even being a coder, I wanted access, because I was like, I need to fix this because I can't keep doing this operation. And unfortunately, the system was not prioritized. And although the risk was high, the priorities in the backlog were elsewhere for the technology team, understandably. And banks have thousands, if not tens of thousands of these processes. And tools like Unqork are perfectly positioned to enable those employees and the business to actually automate this. And almost as annoying as the process for me was probably the amount of times I was asking technology to prioritize it. So it's essentially alleviating while putting in a framework for these businesses to actually automate these systems, make people's jobs more exciting, and also let them focus on the stuff that's commercially valuable for them. And I think banks are starting to recognize this, because they're seeing, oh, wow, we have hundreds, if not thousands of these UDAs and systems that are in place. And this tool is kind of like, can be a pretty quick silver bullet to a lot of those issues. So I think it's a matter of time before kind of learning a low code and no code tool becomes a part of every new joiner's onboarding experience, either when it comes to the maintenance of these types of applications, or even if it comes to building these types of applications for future growth within these banks.
Okay, thank you, Christian. And I think I've got time for one more question, but I'll explain to everyone what I will make sure I do shortly with all the questions and comments that have come in, because there's been so many great ones. But Mary, I suppose I'd love to just give you the last question, which is really from your perspective, from your sponsorship perspective at Deutsche, what is Deutsche's outlook to the future? of maturing the citizen developer model and the kind of adoption of low code, no code tools?
Yeah, Annie, great question. And to be honest, I suppose to that, I would simply say we're just getting started. So, as mentioned, we started quite small in terms of our launch over the course of the last year, focusing on namely one tool, which was Alteryx, to be able to really address some of our data and orchestration concerns that we had within that space. And what we've seen come out of the work that we've done there has been so heartening that we're really excited to be able to scale this further using sort of broader enterprise level tools. We've set up our community of expertise, which is actually part of our technology, data, and innovation team. So they're the ones that are spearing it and sort of holding the pen on kind of driving direction of travel from a bank point of view. And we've created a lot of interconnectivity between myself and operations, but also other groups that have been sort of exploring this use of citizen developer and low code tools in the finance and risk space as well. So thinking back to the slide that Christian showed that showed the various different verticals, a lot of those examples definitely resonated with me based on the conversations that I've had with a lot of my peers across the organization. So I think now from a future outlook perspective, from a DB point of view, Annie, it's really about scaling this and taking sort of the existing structure that we've built in terms of our training curriculum and our ability to tier the levels of expertise of our citizen developers and really hit the ground running to be able to cast a wider net and start blitzing through a lot of these opportunities that we know are out there.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Mary. Sounds quite an exciting few months ahead then. But listen, everyone, I'm conscious of our time. I think we're just coming on 2 in the UK. So firstly, thank you so much to all of the panel. I thought they did a fantastic job and I tried to put them under as much pressure as possible. I would just let everyone know that we have recorded today's session. So we will be sending out a recording to everyone that's registered. I do appreciate so many so many questions and comments came in that we haven't got through today. So we will absolutely be taking all of those. And again, in our follow-up, we'll make sure that we will be addressing and answering all of those. Excitedly, we've also got a new Capco article, of course, coming out on the whole topic. So that will be hitting everyone's LinkedIn, I'm sure, shortly. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone again. I think I'll probably leave you with that statement that Len started with, which is in 2 years' time, by 2024, the majority of development will apparently be done by us as the business developers or the business users. That'll be very, very interesting times. But yeah, thanks everyone and have a great day.